Welcome back to Casual Watch Review channel. I've been doing this channel now for 6 or 7 years, and I've done a lot of micro brands, as you've seen if you've been following me for that long. But one of the brands that started around a similar time as I started the channel was Vaer. They originally started off making minimalist field watches for surfers. They were one of the few brands that guaranteed the water resistance of their watches, which sounds weird because you think a lot of brands would do that, but most of them don't, whereas Vaer would guarantee that if it's a 100-meter watch, that it would be 100 meters water resistance. This is their new watch, their Oceanracer. This is a chronograph watch. I think for if you want a US brand that's great value for money, and are doing a lot to try and source components and have as much of the watches assembled in the US as they can. And they're also really good value, so I'm very interested to know what you think in the comments section down below after this review. So let's flip the camera around and dive straight in. This is the new Vaer R1 Oceanracer chronograph, and this is a homage to vintage racing chronographs from the 1960s and 1970s. It does look a bit like a yacht timer because we have some interesting colors. Now, to be honest, this dial here is the much maligned by me 24-hour dial, which I think is absolutely useless, to be quite honest. It's a waste of a dial for me. But this is because they've used the Meca-Quartz movement. So if I set the main hand of the chronograph off there, we can see it's ticking around like a mechanical watch would. Do have a running second, which I like quite a lot. There is a lot of Meca-Quartz movements, or a lot of Meca-Quartz watches, I should say, that for some reason just have the two dials here, the 24-hour dial and then the elapsed minutes, and they omit the second dial, the running second dial, which means that the watch for the most part is completely still. Now, they do have a version of this movement. I'm not sure if it technically falls within the Meca-Quartz line, a version of this movement that does have the date on, and I think that's the only thing that's missing from this watch is the date. I think this would look fantastic if they'd added a date at the 4:30 position, and that's my only grumble with it, honestly. Well, actually, there is one other one, but let's go over the watch itself. So this is an absolute steal for $399. With the bracelet, it's coming in at $469, so about an extra $70, and I think it's well worth getting this on the bracelet for a number of reasons. It's a pretty decent bracelet for $70. It has quick release on it, a nice milled clasp. My only grumble is it doesn't have any micro adjust on the fly, although there is 4 positions of micro adjust on the clasp itself. But overall, a very comfortable bracelet. We do have male end links, although it does fall quite flat. Maybe if there was female end links, it would fall a little bit flatter. The good thing with Vaer is that they do 2 different versions of this as well. This is the 42mm version, but they do a 38mm version as well. So if you like the design, but you're worried that 42 is a little bit too big for you, then you can go for the 38mm option. So this has a 20mm lug width, it's 42mm case diameter, and we have a 48.5mm from lug to lug, and only a thickness of 12mm. So it fits my 7.2-inch wrist, as you can see here, very well. It's 100 meters water resistance, has a double dome sapphire crystal with AR coating on it. It's slightly domed if we tip it that way, but it's not massively domed. We have the Vaer engraved case back. Now, it's using a VK63 Meca-Quartz movement, which has got about a 40-month battery. I guess that would be depending on how you use the chronograph. And then it has a -10 to +20 seconds a month timing tolerance, which is quite a sway for a quartz watch, but nowhere near a mechanical watch would be, for example, where you could lose 10 or 20 seconds per day. The lume on here it's decent. It's not bad for a chronograph watch. But let's just talk about the design aesthetic of this watch. So to start with, let me just take the glove off. To start with, we have this 12-hour bezel. This is extremely useful. We do have a minute counter on the inner track, so you can use the minute counter on the inner track for the chronograph, but this just allows you to switch to a different time zone or do calculations of different time zones, which I think is very useful. We've got some great design elements on the dial itself. They've done their best to make the 24-hour dial look semi-useful, I guess, with night being in blue and day being in orange there. And then on this 60-minute timer, we can see that they've got some yellow markings to denote every 10 10 minutes. And then we have the running seconds at the bottom, which is ticking away to show us that the watch does have some life to it. There's a lot of design effort that clearly goes into these dials, and I've been a big fan of Vaer right back from when they started, when they were just doing quartz watches, 3-hand quartz watches. The two founders, Ryan and Reagan, two of the nicest people that you'll meet in the watch industry. The case on this watch, I would say, is extremely interesting to me because it's probably the closest that I've ever seen to a case that looks like an Omega Speedmaster. It has the sloping of the lugs and the chamfering down the side that is very Speedmaster-esque. It's not a homage to a Speedmaster, but the case is probably the closest that I've seen to a Speedmaster, which means that it wears very well. And if you're interested in getting that Speedmaster look, but you want something a little bit different, then this is a great option. Here we've got the reverse panda version, but there is a panda version. The dial is not completely white. It has this beigey Faux look to it, and as well as the Faux on the hands. This watch does have a lot of inspiration from other watches. For a start, just talked about the Speedmaster influences that this watch has. The crown is not that far off proportion-wise to a Speedmaster. The case is very, very similar. And then one of the interesting things about this, and something that I thought I was going to dislike about this watch, is the pushers here for the chronograph look like they are screw down pushers, so similar to maybe a Rolex Daytona where you have to unscrew them to action the pushers, but these are faux screws. These aren't actually real screws. The pushers, you don't have to unscrew these, they're fixed. So just to do the pushers, all you do is press them. There's no way to unscrew these pushers. I thought I wouldn't like that, these sort of faux screw-in pushers, but I don't mind them because I think it does balance out visually the crown, because the crown has that knurling on it, and then so do these pushers here. I'm sure that is probably going to divide opinion. I would guess whether you like this faux screw-down pusher look or not, but I've warmed to it, shall we say. So let's get this on wrist and see what it looks like up close. The fit and finish on these Vaer watches is always excellent. Screw-in links for the bracelet, so very easy to adjust. For reference, my wrist is 7.2 inches, so it spans my wrist nicely with that 48.5mm lug to lug. Very comfortable watch to wear. For me, the only improvement would be I wish that it did have a date on it, because then I think it would be an all-rounder, but there is a nice symmetry to the dial without the date on it. I am a little bit biased, I have to say, because I've always been a fan of their watches, and I do like the founders, Ryan and Reagan. They definitely, when they first were considering a chronograph, they did ask me a few questions. It was their previous model about what I liked about chronographs. I really like what they're about as well. I like this idea that they're trying to assemble as much of a watch in the US as they can as their long-term goal. But most importantly, let me know what you guys think in the comments section down below. Is this a bargain for $469? Do you like the fact that it's Meca-Quartz chronograph? Do you think it needs the date like I think? Or am I just on my own there? As always, really appreciate you watching. See you next time on Casual Watch Reviews.